Greetings, Hummingbird fans. This is Terry Masear. I have been rehabbing hummingbirds since 2005, and over the last 10 years our network in Southern California has rescued and released over 10,000 orphaned and injured hummingbirds. And we still do a lot of telephone rescues and are enlisting the help of the public. And the species we rehab in Southern California in order of frequency now are Allens, Annas, black-chinned, Rufus, Costas, broad-tailed, and one little 3-inch calliope, which is the smallest breeding bird in the United States. So the first question is, can you explain how it was determined that the first egg laid in the nest is always female? That's a great question. I didn't know this, and nobody knows this actually except me. And I didn't know until about 2008 I started realizing that every nest that came in from tree trimmers with 2 babies had an older female and a younger male. It took me about a year to figure it out, and then I started watching more closely because I was still learning. And sure enough, every nest that came in after that, with the exception of 3 or 4, were older female, younger male, which is a phenomenal discovery that only a rehabber could make who's getting nests straight out of the environment. The experts are not aware of this even as we speak, so you guys know more than the experts, the geniuses out there. And it is a terrific discovery, and it makes sense because the older female has a much greater chance of survival than the younger male. As you know, the younger male often gets booted out of the nest if things get too tight, and also the older female will get more food and get more attention from the mother early on. So we have pretty much determined that through Bella Hummingbird webcam as well. Over the past few years, all of the nests that we have had a webcam on have been older female, younger male. I think we had 1 or 2 nests that were both females, which happens occasionally, but it's rare. Okay, so the second question, we have speculated that Rosie is a hybrid Allen's Rufus. What part, if any, did that play in her behavior toward Bella and her nest with Patience and Rebel? Well, Rosie's a unique creature in many ways. We believe that she is an Allen's Rufus because a Rufus male was dominating that area, that yard when Rosie was born. So there are other indications that Rosie is a hybrid. She has very hyperactive behavior, which is characteristically Rufus. What we have to remember is that Rufus migrate 7,000 miles annually from Central America to Alaska and back. And historically, they have confined their breeding grounds to these northern areas. But over the past several years, caller Sally Hummingbird Rescue are reporting having feisty and territorial Rufus males hanging around backyard feeders in Los Angeles for months at a time. So these little aggressive male Rufus, I believe, are breeding with Allen's females around LA. We take in dozens of rescued hummingbird fledglings every year that have rust color all the way, more than halfway up the back, all the way up to the shoulder blades. And Allen's male would never have that coloration, and Allen's male would just have a little rust on the tail. We're getting dozens of males, young, what people call Allen's males, but I believe are hybrids, with Rufus all the way up to the shoulder blades, and that's not an Allen. So I believe we've got hybridization going on, which is incredible evolution in action. And it's the reason that the, quote, Allen's population has exploded over the past 10 years, because they're not just Allens, they're Rufus Allen's hybrids, and they're taking over Los Angeles. So what part did Rosie's, getting back to the question, what part did her hybrid nature play in her behavior toward Bella? Well, I believe Rosie was a frustrated mother. I think she was trying to have babies and was unable to, and we know that her first nest, the eggs were not viable, they did not hatch, which is common for first generation hybrids. If you look at hybrids in cats, for example, such as Bengal cats, which are domestic cats bred with Asian leopard cats, the first generation filials are rarely fertile. You'll get 1 out of 10 that are fertile. The other 9 are completely infertile. They can't possibly breed. So I believe that this is what happens in evolution. All species, including humans, because we are hybrids too, we are part Neanderthal, whether we want to believe it or not, we are just like other hybrids in the sense that 2 species came together, hybridized, and created a new species. And that's what happened with Rosie. She was frustrated because she was a hybrid, but she just happened to be one of those first generation fertile hybrids, because now we've seen her raise 1 nest successfully, and her babies looked very much like Rufus babies. And now she has another nest, and the 2 little dino fuzz in the nest will soon reveal what their nature is, whether they are in fact have an Allen's father or a Rufus father. And generally we can tell by the male's coloration and the color of the nest, although this nest is not particularly rust colored. Her last nest was extremely rust colored, which is another Rufus quality. Okay, so number 3, how do hummingbirds use torpor? Do they go into torpor each night when they sleep, or is torpor used for extreme situations? Another good question. Many experts erroneously believe that hummingbirds go into torpor every night. They do not. The babies in rescue in rehab never go into torpor unless they're really badly injured or freezing. We put them in a garage or a heated room at night, the caged birds, because they're not prepared for the cold or any other environmental hazards yet. And they are extremely alert at night. They do sleep, but I have to sneak into the garage like a ninja, because if they hear me, they go nuts and start flying around the cage. So they're nowhere near torpor. They pretty much sleep the way we do. If they're in a very cold environment, such as the Annas who winter in the northern U.S., then they have to go into torpor at night, and their body metabolism will drop to 5% of its normal so that they can conserve heat and energy. So excellent question. Yeah, torpor also is used for severe injuries. When we get injured adults in rehab, they go into torpor the first night, almost always. It's a healing response. It's a way to conserve energy so that they can heal. Next question, what would you say is the most challenging part of being a hummingbird rehabber? I don't know where to start. That's an enormous question that I could talk for hours on, but I'll try to be brief. I would say the most challenging part are the finders. A lot of finders are excellent and are willing to work with us and are very, very good. But many people who find hummingbirds interfere in situations in which they should not, such as picking babies up off of the ground and taking them home when in fact the mother's still feeding them. A lot of finders just don't know what to do when they find a hummingbird, so they tend to make mistakes that are, it's understandable why they make mistakes, but then the corrections are much bigger once people make those mistakes, such as bringing a fledgling home and feeding it for a day and then calling us a day later. So that's the most challenging part, dealing with the public. Every rehabber will tell you that. If you just had the birds are hard enough, don't get me wrong. I would say the hardest part of rehab with the birds is that they die. Some of them don't make it. And the first time it happens to you, it tears your heart out. And a lot of people at that point quit and say, I can't do this. and the tougher rehabbers that hang in there learn how to deal with those challenges, because not every bird's going to make it. Not every bird's a happy ending by a long shot. We probably lose about 20 to 30% of the birds we get in rehab. Not healthy young fledglings, but injured adults, babies that are too young, these kinds of things, injured wing injuries, which are extremely common because the hummingbird wing is such a miracle of microengineering. So there are many, many challenging parts to being a hummingbird rehabber. You walk about 7 or 8 miles a day around your rehab center, just because the babies have to be fed every 30 minutes, as those of you who watch Patience and Rebel know. And you have to act like a mother, but then you have 60 other birds on the property, all in a different level of development. So there are extreme challenges, but there's a learning curve, and as you proceed through your rehab experience, you get stronger and more capable of dealing with all of those challenges. Next question. You've been rehabbing hummingbirds for over 10 years. Is there one that stands out for you, and why? Oh, there are several that stand out for me. If you've read my book, Fastest Things on Wings, I would say Pepper probably grabbed my heart more than any hummingbird I've ever had, because Pepper came in as with a pectoral injury, actually, that affected her flight. She was attacked in Griffith Park by an adult male when she was a teenager. And so Pepper suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. And those of you who have read the book, I don't want to give away I don't want to give away what's going to happen, but Pepper essentially became fearful of adult males and was attacked again in rehab, and then that set off a chain of events that revealed some incredible bonding that Pepper made with me. Hummingbirds are not supposed to bond with people, but some do, and Pepper did, and nearly died as a result of it, but fortunately I did not. And others, of course, Gabriel, the star of the book, very, very special bird, and Iris, who was an incredible black-chinned female who just loved all other birds, had an unbelievable nurturing instinct, nothing like what you think of a hummingbird at all, just a kind of nursemaid to babies, and just the sweetest bird I've ever known. So yeah, there are a lot that stand out, and when you release those birds, it is really tough to say goodbye, because you just don't want to let them go, but you have to let them go because they're hummingbirds. They have to be free. Okay, so next question: have there been some lows as a hummingbird rehabber that made you question whether the stress was worth it? Just about every morning in June, yeah. Every morning you get up at 5:30. You've been doing it for 5 months. The phone rings nonstop. I get about 20 calls a day in June. And when you have 60 birds in 4 different sets of cages and the ICU, and 20 to 30 calls a day, and hot weather, mites, yeah, there are times when you hit the wall, and of course every rehabber will tell you, why am I don't know why I'm doing this. I must be crazy. But there is tremendous stress, but it's worth it when you open those aviary doors after 6-8 weeks of taking care of these gorgeous little creatures, and release them and watch them spiral hundreds of feet up into the sky. And the first thought that comes into your mind is the way that baby looked when it came in, broken, hopeless, dying, and you brought it back to life, and that makes it all worthwhile. If it weren't for that, honestly, nobody would do it. You have to be nuts. You're giving up 4 or 5 months of your life to these birds, and it's tremendously stressful to skirt that edge all the time, walk that fine line between life and death with so many of them. but they are worth it, as you can see when you see them out in nature. So, number 7. The next question: what would you say has surprised you more than anything else about hummingbird behavior? That's easy. Their emotional abilities and their intelligence. They are incredibly complex, multi-dimensional creatures that have tremendous emotional responses to things, and the differences in personalities are astonishing. They're just like people. Some are extremely tough and aggressive and don't want anything to do with people. They're completely independent and just want out. And then the other end of the spectrum, some are extremely fragile and dependent and frightened. And usually those are females, the younger Allen's females, black-chinned females, some of the Anna's females. But occasionally there's a male like that. I had a broad-tailed who was a real baby, and Acosta's. So I'm constantly surprised by their personalities and their memory. Their memory, they are programmed to have a fabulous memory. Despite having a brain the size of a BB, they can migrate several thousand miles and remember where each feeder was along the way, on their way up and on their way back to their breeding grounds. They will remember their feeders. They will stop at the same feeders every time, every year, year after year for several years in a row. And the fact that a hummingbird like Blacktop, whom I described, the black-chinned in the book, who I released, and then he went to Mexico for the winter, and then came back and sat on the same perch a year later and started picking off fruit flies just as he'd done the year before. I try to imagine finding my way home from Mexico to LA without GPS or a map by air, and I can't even fathom how he did that, how they do that. It's phenomenal. It's beyond anything we could do. So yeah, there are many things that surprised me, but their intelligence and emotional IQ and memory would be the top things. Yeah. Next question: the chicks grow up fast. Yeah, science fiction, right? At what point will their eyes open, and when will they start walking around? Well, hummingbirds can't walk. Hummingbirds spend their whole lives perched or in flight. They are physically incapable of walking, unlike most birds that can use their legs. They are very mobile birds, aerial birds. They're not ground birds at all. So their eyes will open in the next few days. Some open sooner than others, usually around the feather duster stage, the pin-feathered stage, which Rosie's two babies are entering now. So they should open it within the next day or two. But some open earlier, but normally when they're in the first 10 days, they don't, around 12 days. Okay, and then they open slowly, not right away. It takes a few days until they're wide-eyed, and then they can see you, and then they know what their mother looks like, whether it's a bird or a human, and they respond to whoever's feeding them. And so they won't start walking around. They will start flying at about 24, 25 days. They will fledge from the nest, and then the rest of their lives are spent perched or in flight. Next question: at what age do hummingbirds start grooming and preening? Well, you can see that the babies are doing that already. Once they get their feathers, it becomes clearer that they're grooming themselves, they're preening their feathers, and so they will go through a pin-feathered stage where they don't really have feathers. But they'll still groom. You'll see them trying to pick things off themselves, especially if they have mites, which a lot of birds do this year. Even though they can't see, they respond to things on their skin. But they groom and preen a lot once their feathers are fully out. After about 3 weeks, they're fully feathered and they're ready. they're ready to be real birds. So they start grooming in order to open the sheaths on the feathers and get the feathers to pop out. Can I tell the difference between summer and dusky? The next question. Yes, I can. Summer is bigger. Sometimes it depends on the angle of the camera, but usually the female's just a little bit bigger. I was able to tell the difference between Luna and Sol all the way along. I've been really busy doing interviews and a lot of promo for the book, so I haven't been watching Summer and Dusky as much as I normally would, but usually it's easy to tell because the female's just a little, the egg was laid earlier and the female's just a little bit bigger than the male. So when they grow up, Summer should have a white neck, a white throat, which is characteristic of the female. And Dusky, if he's a boy, will have the white throat with the brown spots, a much heavier gorget, dark spots, which will turn into a bright orange when he becomes an adult male. Summer, on the other hand, won't develop her gorget until into the first year of her life. It will be later. The female gorget doesn't come in until after several months, whereas the male starts to come in usually after 2 months. Okay, even before that sometimes. Is there a U.S. network for rehabbers? A viewer in Washington has lots of hummers and would like to know where to take the hummer if she finds a rehabber. Hummingbird rehab is very difficult to find. We're lucky in Los Angeles because we have several, and this rehab network has developed over the course of the last 20 years. Some states have no hummingbird rehab, and because most states don't have hummingbirds. They have hummingbirds, but they don't get the babies we do. I'm in Portland, Oregon right now, and I have Rufus hummingbirds and Anna's hummingbirds, and the young ones are coming to the feeders now. So the fledglings are out, but I never saw a baby because they're out in the forest, and their nests are out there, and you just don't find hummingbirds. You don't see them. In LA, they're everywhere. They're on our porches, they're hitting our windows, they're sitting out on our lawns and our driveways. They're falling out of the trees all over the place because we have released so many birds there. We've seeded the Los Angeles area, and there are way more there. So it's difficult to find hummingbird rehabbers in some states just because they don't have enough to make it a worthwhile preoccupation. But usually, if people can find any kind of rehabber, they can be directed to someone who might know how to do hummingbirds. But like here in Portland, there's a Audubon Society, and when I asked them how many hummingbirds they did the year before, they said 12, and I thought they meant in a day. So I said, no, in a year, and they said 12. And that was a year that we had done about 700, I think. So if people are from other states, it is difficult, but they can call Hummingbird. Like the U.S. government has a website that I don't have it on hand, but there's a U.S. rehabbers website that breaks down all the rehabbers in every region of the country. So good luck with that, or they can call us. Next question, I have read that human touch on eggs or baby birds no longer is considered to be a problem. Do you feel this is true for hummingbird? Of course, it's not a problem at all. Birds don't have a strong olfactory sense. They don't have a strong sense of smell, and I don't think they care, to be honest, even if they could smell us. Hummingbird mothers are extremely dedicated and extremely loyal to their babies. They will go through a lot to retain that connection, no matter what kind of human interference they've encountered. To answer this question and put it in perspective, I once had and it is an urban myth, by the way. If you touch a baby bird, it doesn't matter. The mother doesn't care at all. I once had a caller who found a young fledgling on her porch, and she was on her way to a birthday party with her 9-year-old daughter. So she just put the baby in her purse and went to the party, thinking, well, I'll call somebody when I get home. Fed it sugar water while she was there, of course, but 29-year-olds touched the bird. And then she brought it back, called me, we put it back in a faux nest, a makeshift nest, and the mother started feeding it 30 seconds later. So I tell people, you can take a baby to a birthday party. They don't care. As long as it's back where the mother can feed it, they will take over if it's not too long. If we wait more than several hours or a day, the mother gives up looking, so she just doesn't, she's moving on. In nature, there's no time to worry about what you've lost. So if it's a day later, I have not been able to reconnect them, but I have been able to reconnect the mother with a fledgling, a lost fledgling, up to several hours later. So yeah, no problem with touching. That's an urban myth. Next question, do you have any general guidelines on what to do, what not to do if you find a baby hummingbird or egg out of its nest? Well, the eggs we really can't do anything with. If an egg's out of the nest, it's pretty much you can put it back, but we don't we can't hatch an egg, so that's kind of a moot issue. What not to do when you find a baby hummingbird? Yes, people feed them all kinds of terrible things, like bread or seeds and things that hummingbirds don't eat, and then or ants, as people who have read Fastest Things on Wings know, that was my first fatality. So the best thing to do is to call a rehabber, or at least, with the internet, it's so much easier now for people to find out what kinds of things hummingbirds eat, but really they just need sugar water. But essentially, it's best not to take them out of their environment, because most of the fledgling calls that we're getting this time of year, the mother's still feeding the baby. He's on the ground. He's trying to fledge. So what we do is, and I did this probably 300 times this summer, is build a faux nest with a container and some shredded tissue and put it up in the tree, and then the mother continues to feed the baby. So the worst thing you can do is take it out of its environment, take it in the house and start feeding it. Because I've had people call me and tell me, I'm feeding the baby hummingbird in the kitchen, but the mother's hovering right outside the window. Well, so yeah, put it back out there. What are we waiting for, right? Now, some of the babies don't have mothers. They've been disconnected, so we still try to put them back and then watch and see if she comes. If she doesn't, then it's straight to rehab, because they have no hope without some kind of rehabilitation. So next question, what appears to be the favorite nesting place for a hummer? Type of tree, trumpet vine in Southern California. And do they ever nest in a bottle brush? Well, bottle brushes are dangerous because they attract so many hummingbirds. Nesting in a bottle brush tree is would be like nesting next to 5 feeders, because a lot of male hummingbirds will come in to feed on the bottle brush tree, a lot of other females, and it's just too dangerous for a mother with babies to have all those hummingbirds hanging around. So I do not think they have nested in bottle brush trees, unless it's a later time in the year when there are no flowers. But Allens love ficus. That's their absolute favorite tree, the ficus tree, because if you look at the back of an Allen, an Allen's back is identical to the ficus leaf in size and shape and color. And it's just amazing. In rehab, I learned this one night when I was looking at the birds in the aviary. When they sleep in the tree, you really can't tell the difference between them and the leaves. And I just thought that was an amazing insight into their camouflage and why they choose the ficus trees. Annas prefer bigger trees like avocado trees and pine trees, the taller, darker green, which again match their colors, match their baby's colors. They do like vines. They love tibouchina, things that sit on the porch. And Annas and Costas love wind chimes because they're protected. If a wind chime is on a porch, it's protected from above from predators, and it's protected from below. Nobody can climb up it. So Anna's will often choose wind chimes. Costas choose wind chimes, light poles, places where predatory birds can't get them from above. And then, of course, other birds like Rufus, the pure Rufus, not our little hybrids that are mixed with Allens, will nest out in the forest in large trees, and as will the broad-tailed, which are generally a mountain bird. So they all have their favorite places, but for the species that is predominant in Southern California, which are the Allens and Allen's Rufus hybrids, the ficus is the #1 choice. Why is honey not recommended for feeders? Well, honey doesn't have high enough sugar content for hummingbirds, basically. They don't really eat honey, and it's too sticky for their crops. When I get babies who have been fed honey, they have gummed up crops, just like brown sugar gums up a crop, because honey's so sticky and viscous. So they need sugar water because it's lighter and it's not as viscous. It won't stick in their crops. Sometimes adult hummingbirds will lick tree sap when they're desperate, but they don't eat enough of it to get a gummed up crop. But honey will absolutely gum up a crop. So and then we have to siphon the crop and wash it out, and we can do that. But pure honey is deadly for a baby. So even if it has antibacterial properties, it just doesn't work for the hummingbird's crop. Okay. What do we feed hummingbirds in rehab? We feed them Nectar Plus. It's a powder. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I missed one. Most hummingbird feeders are red. Is this the best color for a feeder? Oh, red. Yes, red is the ultimate color for hummingbirds. They are obsessed with red, and red is the key to the hummingbird visual world. So yes, it is absolutely the best color. Some people have, the yellow flowers are really unnecessary. It's more for our gratification to put those little yellow flowers on the feeders. But red is the ultimate color. When birds get trapped in houses or garages, I have the person who has the bird open the doors, windows, and drape bright red cloth, red towels, red clothes on the doors, and the birds always come down and go out that door because they come down to look at the red. So red goes all the way back to their beginnings. It's the color of their favorite flowers, and it's the color that they have on each other that attracts them, that brings them together. So yeah, absolutely. What do we feed hummers in rehab? We feed them a Nectar Plus, a powder that we buy. It's actually manufactured overseas, oddly, and it's very expensive. We use it for all babies from nestlings to all the way up to the pre-releases in the aviary. So it works for all hummers. When we get naked babies or dinofuzz nestlings in rehab, we have to supplement the Nectar Plus with further protein because it's just not heavy enough. You can see how many fruit flies Rosie feeds her babies, so they have to have a lot more protein. As they get older, and stop growing as quickly, their protein needs diminish. So the Nectar Plus that we feed them works. But one caveat here, of course, we don't want the public buying Nectar Plus and feeding the birds and thinking that they can rehab them, because it's not so simple as giving them just the right food. They have to have training, just like any other creature. Once it loses its mother, they're essentially like a 1-year-old child. They have to go through a series of stages where they learn what they have to do to make it out there. So we keep a hummer for a minimum of 4 weeks, usually 6, and they go through the ICU, small flight cage, large flight cage, and then finally the aviary, and at each level they learn different skills. How do you and other rehabbers steady your hand to get the dropper of food to their tiny pig? Oh, good question. As I get older, I'm definitely getting shakier. Some rehabbers are really good. They can do a one-handed feed with the angio. I've always had to use two. I've never been steady enough. Some of my rehabbers can do it with one, and as the season goes along, you get shakier because you're under more stress, you're more nervous, you're more exhausted. So I use two hands, and with a little 1 cc syringe and a angio that you stick down into their crops, and they just shoot the food into the crop, and of course you know they will open whenever they hear you coming because they're hungry. So it's being steady is important, and you aim toward the baby's right side because that's their crop. Otherwise, they can be aspirated when you feed if they're fed improperly, and this does happen when some finders feed babies and use an eyedropper to give them sugar water, and they will aspirate. So you do have to be extremely careful with that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm just kind of have reached the end of the questions. If anyone has any more, they can write in. But while we're waiting, I just wanted to point out that hummingbirds, one thing that a lot of people have been interested in with the Rosie and Bella Hummingbird webcam are the Rufus Allen's hybrids, and like I said earlier, they are a unique species that I believe is coming into is becoming the predominant species in our area. So I believe that these babies are in fact examples of hybrids, and they seem awfully hyperactive for Allen's. I've had a lot of Allen's hummingbirds in rehab, and the females are never aggressive. So I think that we have a lot of Rufus Allen's hybrids because the Allen's females are generally kind of retiring and shy in rehab. I've never had one that was anything like Rosie, so she's unique. Okay, so let's see, where are we? There are some more. I have another question here. Rosie has a very different feeding schedule for her chicks when they are very young, sometimes going for an hour between feeding. Why do you think she does this? I don't understand Rosie much more than anybody else does. She's definitely different, and it may be because she's part Rufus, and we don't really know what the schedule that Rufus are on compared to, say, the Allens. But she does seem to jump around in terms of her feeding schedule. But hummingbirds also don't wear a watch, and they're not on every 30-minute clock, and don't necessarily have to be. They can, as long as the babies get the same amount of food in a day, whether it's every 15 minutes or every hour, doesn't really matter. So Rosie's keeping up. They're definitely growing and healthy. There's no question that they're getting enough food. But as to why she waits between feeding, I really don't know. Perhaps that's a Rufus quality that we just have not normally seen. But she's definitely getting them enough food, so no worries there. What are the biggest mistakes people make with respect to hummers? I'm not sure if you mean hummingbirds in the wild or hummingbirds in rehab. So if you could maybe re-ask me that question in a minute, maybe clarify, because I'm not sure what you mean by mistakes, mistaken assumptions or mistakes with babies. So if you could re-ask that question, that would be great. Okay, and let me jump to the next one. If you had one message you would like to get out to the public regarding hummingbirds, what would it be? Well, that's pretty easy too. Hummingbirds are wild animals, just like all wildlife. They deserve our care and respect. And what the message I would love for people to understand is that hummingbirds they're not pets, they're not to be treated as something that can be brought in the house or kept or loved like a pet. They are wild, and we need to show them respect and care in their wild environment, and not abuse them by leaving dirty feeders out, not try to take the babies in the house and keep them, things like that, things that we just have to see them for what they are, as these beautiful creatures living out there the way they should in nature, and respect them for that. Okay, let's see. Hold on a second, I'm getting overwhelmed with questions now. Okay, you said that mother hummingbirds are very dedicated to their babies. How do mothers react when their nests or babies are taken away for rehabbing? I'm thinking specifically about Bella's babies. Yes, the mothers do. Well, Rosie, of course, was a very big problem with the Patience and Rebel nest, and Rosie's mother, of course, is an incredibly nurturing and wonderful mother. She's a terrific bird, and I think that Rosie's mother was feeling some emotional pain, and I do believe that hummingbird mothers do feel emotional pain when they lose their babies, and they will sit around and look for them for a while and seem upset. But she doesn't know what happened to them. Unfortunately, we can't tell her, oh, we took your babies to rehab and they're going to be fine. But that had to be done, and the good thing is Rosie's mother moved on and quickly built another nest. So I think it's pretty quick after they lose the babies that they move on. It's the way of nature. So it's good that they can be that way, that they aren't like us and they don't grieve for a long period of time the way humans do. We often tend to anthropomorphize and say, oh my gosh, the mother's going to be crying all day, all for a week, she'll miss her babies. No, Rosie's Patience and Rebel's mother moved on very quickly and built a new nest. She's doing what she has to do, so that was good. So the next question, how would an interested person try to become a hummingbird rehabber? Well, you might want to get a psychological evaluation before you decide to do that. It's very tough work, and I'm joking in a way, but in a way I'm not. You really have to be a unique kind of person who can deal with the public, deal with a lot of very sad things that happen in rehab, be physically strong, physically capable, and also have a lot of time on your hands during the nesting season, 15 hours a day. So if you're interested in turning your life over to that madness, come and join us. We usually start people out by driving birds that we get calls about that we can't go pick up, but that people won't bring. And then after people have driven a little while, they start working under the tutelage of an experienced rehabber, and you have to be coached for a year or two, and then you have to get a permit from the state. You have to be permitted under a wildlife rehab organization. So all of those things kind of happen as over the course of time as a process. But the early stages, generally, you work with an experienced rehabber. So it's a long road, but within a year or two, you could be doing more than you ever hoped possible. So next question, have you noticed that Rosie feeds her chicks rather vigorously? Yes, I have. Is this normal for a hummer feeding her chicks? Yes, it is normal. Mother hummingbirds are, they look like little machine guns when they disgorge the insects and nectar in their crops into the babies' crops. They put their beak all the way down into the crop and disgorge. So yes, it looks violent, but in fact this is what the babies need. They need that kind of food. They need that kind of that kind of jolt. It doesn't seem to bother them at all. They seem to be completely content with being fed that way. So but again, Rosie is a maniac. She's incredibly hyperactive and compared to our Allens down in LA, she looks kind of like a crazy bird that's off the map, wired. And I think that is, again, goes back to her Rufus nature. When I see the Rufus hummingbirds out by my feeders, a lot of them never land on the feeder, they just hover feed. Most of them are in such a hurry, and what we have to keep in mind is these little creatures are programmed to fly 7,000 miles a year. So if Rosie is a bird that's a hybrid, but she's still got that Rufus blood but doesn't migrate anymore, she's got to burn off that excess energy. She needs to do something. She can't just sit around, because normally she'd be flying to Alaska and back. So that may be why Rosie has some unusual behavior that everyone seems to have noticed. Do you think hybrid Allen's Rufus will get a new name if they become predominant in the area? We probably should. It's difficult to prove that we have the Allen's Rufus hybrids without sophisticated genetic analysis, and we haven't had any experts who have so far volunteered to do that. I'm not capable of doing that myself. It would take somebody with much more of a background in genetics to do this, but perhaps we will one day get a name for these hybrids, because I do believe that they are here. There's no question in my mind that we're getting massive hybridization all over the Southern California and greater Los Angeles area. And because of that, what we thought was the Allen's population, which has tripled in the last 10 years compared to the Annas and black-chinned, in fact, are not just Allen's, but a hybrid Allen's Rufus, which is the reason there are so many of them. It's not just one species that's exploding, it's two. And when you add on top of that explosion, the Rufus personality, which is highly aggressive around the feeders, they are making enormous inroads into the Southern California region. So we need a name if anybody wants to think of one. But on the other hand, we still need to get some geneticists to prove that we have these creatures that are in fact hybrids and are a marvelous example of evolution in action. In regards to the next question, in regards to Rosie's first nest that didn't hatch, were these eggs open to get an idea of how far they developed? No, it's really illegal to, to tamper with eggs. So we don't do anything with eggs. We don't open them or do anything because we're not supposed to. It would be great to know, but I believe that they just were not viable, and how far they developed or not it doesn't really matter. I think they were just an example of a hybrid problem in reproduction. So either way, she came back and made it work with the next set, and now is making it work again. So no worries with that one. Some of the younger birds, often teenage mothers we call them, young females that were were hatched in February and March, will sometimes have babies in June or July, and they're just not ready. They're too young. They're like teenage mothers. They build terrible nests. The whole pregnancy thing came as a big surprise to them, and they often have non-viable babies as well. So it's a pretty common thing when they're young or when they're hybrids. When is the best time to trim your trees? Thank you for asking that. Please, not in the spring and summer. We've been fighting with the city for years, trying to get them to stop trimming the trees in the spring and summer. We lose hundreds and hundreds of hummingbird babies because of this foolish and irrational practice of trimming trees in the summer. The best time to trim trees is in the fall. If you're going to trim your trees in the summer, it should be super early spring, not even spring, but late winter. When we trim trees and hedges in Los Angeles, starting from March to June, we're trimming nests like crazy, and I get calls every day. It's so sad, from tree trimmers with hummingbird nests, and not just hummingbirds, but all birds, doves, finches. We need to learn to respect nature and to be aware that these are their homes. This is where they live and reproduce. And we don't need to trim our trees that time of year. There are other times that's just fine. It's not going to kill the trees. So we have been really warring with the city, but it's hard because the cities don't pay attention. A lot of individuals don't pay attention. They want their tree trimmed right away because it's growing fast. So that's again another thing we're trying to get the word out about. So if your tree has to be trimmed and there is a hummer nest in it, is it enough to avoid the area where the nest is? Yes, sometimes. It is. If you can trim, it's a very delicate procedure to avoid the nest. But the other problem is they need overhead canopy. So you can't just trim the tree above them because they need shade, high overhead, and then clearance just above the nest. So we don't want to expose the nest to predators. The mothers build them where they do for a reason. They build them in places that are safe. And so often when we start tampering with nature and tampering with their choice, we destroy the intelligent decisions the mothers have made. So it's best not to trim the tree at all. But if you have to, yeah, you can avoid that side, that area, if possible. Okay, so switching gears, do you think that the hybridization of Allen's rufus is a result of global warming? No, I do not. Not at all. I think that it's a result of evolution. And I think it's just a fantastic thing that's happening. I think this is how all species evolved, not just birds, but like I said earlier, how we evolved. Modern humans interbred with Neanderthals and created a new species, Homo sapiens. So we have these Allen Rufus hybrids, and I think they're more the result of, ironically, of us attracting them into our backyards and planting lots of flowers and hanging lots of feeders, because there are thousands and thousands of sugar feeders in Los Angeles. If you drive down the street, you see them everywhere. And we've planted a lot of flowers for the hummingbirds that are incredibly attractive. So now when Rufus males fly through, historically they would fly over the Southern California area, and it was essentially a desert. There was no reason to stop. But now the Rufus males, they know that this is where all the great food is, on top of there being some very attractive females. So they fly, excuse me, when they fly north, they stop in LA, they come to the backyard sugar feeders, and while they're there, they check into the hotel and, start dating, because they see that this is a great population, a great place to have babies. So we're getting a lot of calls from people all over LA now that will tell us that this Rufus male's been in my backyard for 3 months, he's dominating the feeders. Well, he's supposed to be coming up to Portland, coming up to Alaska, but for some reason he has decided to stay there. Maybe he doesn't need to migrate anymore because he's got everything he needs right there. So I don't think it's global warming. I think it's more us. So do I think some of these Allen's Rufus decide to migrate, or is that I'm not sure what the question is. Is that a brief? Yes, of course, I do think I know some of them migrate. At my feeders in LA, I would have Rufus males hang around for a week, and then they would leave. And I know that they're here. I see them here every day, up in Portland. So they would hang around just long enough to recharge, and drink sugar water. And those males were not doing their courtship displays for the Allen's females. They weren't doing the dive displays. They would just dominate a feeder for 3 or 4 days and then they'd leave. But there are lots of reports now of Rufus males doing the courtship display, the dive display. And you can tell the difference between the Allen's and Rufus males dive display, by the way, by the sound. Their tail feathers make a different music The Rufus male has a buzzy zing, like zzz, zzz, like a bee, and the Allen's male sounds kind of like a kind of high-pitched whistle, like air going over the air passing quickly over the over a bomb, like it sounds like an incoming bomb. So you can tell the difference by the sound. You don't necessarily need to see the male. Of course, we can tell the difference between Rufus and Allen's males easily by seeing the adult males look different. The Rufus has a rust back, the Allen's has a green back. But the sound is what appeals to the female. And the faster the male can fly, the better music he makes. And that's why females choose the males that they do, because they like the sound that he makes, the music that he creates, if you will. So I think probably the Allen's females are pretty attracted to those little Rufus males who can make a kind of exciting, fast sound that may inspire the females to breed with them. Can they do DNA testing from the black pearls, the pupa birds? I don't think so. I'm not a geneticist, but I think you have to do a blood test for a genetic analysis or some kind of skin or blood test. But like I said, I am not an expert on that. That would sure make it easy, wouldn't it, if we could do DNA testing? But on the other hand, we get enough babies, hybrid babies, in rehab that we could perform genetic testing on them easily. But again, I know nothing about this. I'm not going to claim that I can explain this at all. Only a geneticist would be able to tell us how to do this. But certainly from their appearance, there's no question that something strange is going on down there, and we are not living in the Allen's world that we did 10 years ago. Okay, so it's time to wrap up, I'm being told. Thank you, Bella Hummingbird webcam fans. Thank you, Bella Hummingbird webcam, and everybody who has supported the Hummers through their efforts and their donations. We really appreciate your compassion and your desire to help these little monsters take over our world. So I look forward to talking with some of you in the future, and I have enjoyed this very much, so thank you.